Hello students, I welcome you all to week 3 of my Swayam course titled Comics and Graphic Novels in Indian Context. In this week, we are looking at the emergence of graphic novel forms in India, and in the last lecture we had drawn a broad outline of how graphic novels form emerged and how Hilary Schuth, a very important critique on graphic novels, had written vastly about the exclusivity of form and content of graphic novels. So, the lectures of this week come under the purview of Introduction to Indian Graphic Novels, where you will get exposed to why it emerged, what were the socio-economic and political factors that led to the emergence of this new form in India particularly, because this is actually a Western, this form also, just like the comics, emerged first in the Western world, and then India was quick to borrow, or India was quick to adapt this very form to tell its own tales in its own individualistic, unique and indigenous manner. This is lecture 3, which is titled as Graphic Novels in Reading New India, Post-Millennial Indian Fiction in English. This is a book, Reading New India, which is written by Emma Dawson Varghese, and we will be discussing on the graphic novel part what she has to say about the emergence of Indian graphic novels. Emma Dawson has contributed largely to the Indian visuality through graffiti art form, through graphic novels, and particularly she is a scholar who is actually devoted to the study of Indian graphic novels. So if you want to search the scholars who have worked on Indian graphic novels, probably Emma Dawson will be one of the very first few names to introduce how the Indian graphic novels emerged in the contemporary India. So now, as the title of the book, because this graphic novel parts features in her book Reading New India. So Reading New India, obviously then we go back to the graphic novel form, then as a result of it, what Emma wants to say is that graphic novel is also a part of New India. Graphic novel is also helping in making India new again, is also helping in reshaping the identities of people in India, and what she is particularly interested is in the post-millennial India, that is the post-2000s India. So before proceeding with my lecture, there are few concepts here that we need to discuss, because the entire feature on graphic novel that Emma Dawson is trying to give actually centers around few economic changes that came in India, and I assume that only the student of economics and few other students at BA level must be familiar with the concepts like liberalization, pre-liberalization and post-liberalization India, and it is quite surprising. It is also quite fascinating that how economy can help shape up the new literary genre in India, because it was actually the liberalization and post-liberalization year that shaped up the emergence of Indian graphic novel, which Emma Dawson Varghese argues in this book. So she also says that graphic novels are helping to shape a new India, an India which is very different from the pre-2000s India. So she says that 2000 have been the year 2000, or the millennial, the millennial year has been a very watershed moment, a very landmark moment in the history of India, so that a lot of things have changed after 2000 which were not there earlier. In fact, it is altogether a new India that we are seeing after 2000s. So what she says is that pre-liberalization years were roughly the years centering around, which actually centered around after India's independence, that is 1947 to 1991. So 1991 was the year when internet came to India, and things started to change. Dish cable connections came to our televisions. Doordarshan was the only channel that people had access to. Pre-1991, it was just the Doordarshan shows that people were aware of. Not much scope of entertainment channels were there. But 1991 brought a revolution in India's economy because of the advent of internet, the advent of computer systems, that you could send an email in few minutes, form of communication change which could be received in other part of the world. And it actually turned India's world upside down, when people could not believe that this is something that is also possible. So what did it lead to? It actually led to so from 1991, first let me give you the timelines. From 1991 to 2000, you have liberalization years, and from 2000 onwards, after 2000s, you have post-liberalization years. So what is this liberalization? Liberalization, as the word itself suggests, it is kind of being liberal. It is kind of giving flexibility to the economy, where economy can actually experiment with itself by introducing the internet, so many channels, so many entertainment modes. People were also gaining access to Western culture by TV channels like MTV, Channel V. So, despite of being situated in India in a very small city, just by having a cable connection, you could actually take access to Western music, Western culture, Western shows. Shows like Small Wonder were being translated in India's Star Plus channels, which were very, family friendly channels to say. And so this is liberalization years, where economy is trying to get flexible and experiment. But what happens post liberalization, that is 2000, it has been a decade. From 1991 to 2000, internet has been introduced, dish TVs have been introduced, people have become familiar with internet completely. Smartphones have started to make their impact in people's life after 2000. So what happened? Internet had already been introduced, but after 2000, now what are the effects, what are the impact that internet created, is something that is studied in the post liberalization year. What is the impact of liberalization? How did it affect the life of common people? Now we see in today's world, we have smartphone. Everybody, even a rickshaw puller, has a smartphone where he is listening to songs, where he can make reels, he can take selfie, he can send videos on WhatsApp. Almost everybody in India is familiar with such kind of technological advancement, irrespective of the fact whether they were educated or not educated. So education comes later, but it was the very wide exposure to the technology, that everybody has a smartphone, everybody has an internet. You buy a SIM and then you get a complimentary internet package, which is there, which you can utilize for a month or two, and you can see all sorts of things. And despite being situated in any kind of remote place, you have access to what is happening nationally and globally. So this is what post-liberalization years did. Also, what post-liberalization years, there were certain kind of other impacts, there were certain kind of other changes that were also seen in the post-liberalization years, that is after 2000. Wanted to have, life had changed completely. I mean, all sorts of comforts, all sorts of lavishness, all communication had become so instant and immediate. For cell phones is available, I said, with everyone. And it was it was a world upside down for a person who was born in the pre-liberalization year around 1960s and 1970s, and there was a radical shift for them to live in an India of 2000, after 2000s, because and with COVID, obviously in 2022, again there is a landmark shift, but then I'm not going into it, which will be a completely separate area for study. But then I'm just limiting my studies till 2020, or 2019, when the COVID had just not struck us. So what has happened? Because the life had changed, the world has changed. Earlier in the pre-liberalization year, there was only focus on the public sector, but post-liberalization, it were the private entities that were rising, or small-time manufacturers, small enterprises were rising. There was liberalization in the real sense, there was flexibility. India had signed deals with so many other foreign countries, for example, Japan, for example, US, France, to make its cities metropolitan cities, to give them a world-class infrastructure where MNCs, where MNCs were coming to India and building their corporate offices in different parts of the country. So the culture was changing. So it was a complete incoming and outgoing of people of various nationalities in India, where on a day-to-day basis it was very convenient, very easy, and very normal to meet people if you're working in a metropolitan city, to somebody of a different nationality who may be sitting next to you, which was not possible, or which was very which seemed like, going out of country seemed like altogether entering into a different planet. But then this kind of flexibility that was given, that this kind of change that was brought about by the internet in the post 2000s changed the country altogether. So what is it that is happening now? People, we don't, even though the landscape has changed, the economy has changed, the socio-political scenarios have changed, the way people think have changed, but those people who continue to live in a pre-liberalized India are same who continue to live in the post-millennial India. So in a way, so there is a nostalgia, there is a sense of loss, there is a sense of kind of something has been lost in the past years, which we cannot revive now, which we cannot bring back now. So there's a longing to go back to the past, and this very longing, this very nostalgia is kind of capitalized, is kind of exploited in the literature of the post-millennial India. So you will see literature that comes after 2000s in India is a kind of an urge to go back and relive those days. So that is why, as a demand of this urge to relive those years which had already passed by, there were emergence of remix songs, there was emergence of film remakes. Why do we want to remake a film? Are there no stories to be told? Are there no new stories to be told? Is there nothing new left? No, because people want to go back and see what they had already left in a very contemporary scenario. So the experiment is being done by mixing the new with old. This is what a very famous graphic novelist, Sarnath Banerjee, says, that we are living in a world of bipolar disorder, where we have an urge to go back to the past, but we also want to keep moving with the future advancements. So he's saying that, we are unable to decide what do we want to do. We are living in a state of flux where we want new with old, and as a result of it, the cultural markers, including literature, films and other media, are trying to provide with the remixes, and all sorts of old fashions are coming. Bell bottoms were being worn by Amitabh Bachchan in 1970s and 80s, but now you see bell bottoms coming again in fashion. So I mean, all this revival is a part of post-millennial India, is an urge to go back and revive the past. Another features that Dawson also brings into focus through this book. What are the other features of New India is that New India has become aspirational. New India wants to become rich. They don't want to be, earlier, if you see our parents or grandparents, if you talk to them, they were very satisfied being a person who had 9-to-5 job and were able to bring money enough, or were able to earn enough to support their family and, send their children to private schools and get them jobs. That was their life. But now the desire, the aspirations to become rich, to be part of the elite circles has become more than ever. So what happens, and how is it, how this urge to become aspirational has been created in the people? It is created through shows like Kaun Banega Crorepati, through shows like Indian Idol, through shows like, voting shows that are televised, voting televised shows where people think that by going on these shows they can win the award money, they can win the cash money, and they can become rich overnight. So the post-millennial generation is not satisfied, is not content being a member of a middle class society, but every day they yearn to have a home of their own, a luxurious car of their own, a very smart gadget, be updated with the latest gadgets that are introduced in the market. So this aspiration is growing and growing, which in a way is being implemented by the economy itself, which in a way is a part of a capitalized society where, a bourgeois society, in a way that, it creates demand. They are creating the demand and then they are meeting the supply themselves. Other few factors, apart from aspirations, there are a lot of things that Dawson goes on to discuss in this book, but apart from aspiration and nostalgia that we just discussed, there is also another factor of how cities are changing, how our landscape, how urban structure is changing. So how urban structure is changing in a way that, we are getting the cities are reinvented in the image of metropolitan cities, even the tier 2. So there are three levels of cities: tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So tier 1 cities are the metropolitan cities, tier 2 cities are the cities which have basic infrastructure, in the sense that they have flyovers, that they have big MNCs there, they have malls there. And tier 3 cities are the remote places. So in a way, tier 3 cities are also now trying to become tier 2 cities. Tier 2 are now becoming to tier 1 cities. So, and there is a stark difference between these tier 1 and tier 2 cities, in the sense that the slum areas are being covered. Some slum areas are being removed when some important visits happen in the city. But then, so they are trying to create an image, or they are also trying to present an image of an uplifted metropolitan city, that they are not less than the big elite cities like Mumbai or Mangalore or Bangalore or Pune or New Delhi whatsoever. So they are also trying to mimic themselves and present themselves as the uplifted cities themselves, which again is a part of India's economic system, because then only the capital will inflow. If there are resources in the city, then only somebody would want to have their companies, then only somebody would want to put their capital in that city. If there are no resources there, why would somebody want to invest? So these are the things that Dawson discusses, and which in a way are related to the emergence of the graphic novel, because graphic novels of post-millennial India are talking about all these issues, are talking about all these things, are in a way kind of documenting the shifts, the changes, the watershed movements that are happening in the post-millennial India. So she begins the graphic novel section by introducing to comics in India. She gives a brief history of Amar Chitrikatha, that they were prominent in 1970s and 90s, 80s, and how Amar Chitrikatha is also known by an acronym called ACK. Then ACK, introduced in 1967, concerned itself with both classical and religious literature of the Indian subcontinent, with tales drawing not only from Puranas and Upanishads, but also those dealing with important figures from Indian history. So this is a basic revision from the Amar Chitrikatha lecture that we have done, that how mythological and historical, and how the comic book was exploiting on the India's civilization, and historical stories, mythological stories from the epics, to narrate its tale in a very informative as well as entertaining tone and educative tone to the children. ACKs tend to inform the young generation about the richness of Indian heritage and culture. Presently, they still exist as paper comic books and are also available online. Emma Dawson deals with the graphic novels in the post-liberalized India. Economic liberalization and the advent of the internet in 1991 led to the era of economic liberalization. However, situations changed from the 2000s onwards, when India became accustomed and comfortable with the changes introduced in the liberalization years. Social media apps and digital platforms for food ordering, marriages and meetings were introduced, resulting in a parallel world of screens removed away from the real-time experiences. Just as I said, now post-2000 is all about studying the impact and effect of internet on the society. You have an app for everything today. You have an app for ordering food, you have app for dating, you have app for marriage, you have conducting online meetings. There is almost, we have moved from real world to virtual world. So virtual world has also become a lived reality, a live reality in which we are living, and which is as much important as the real world to us. And nobody thought that this virtual world will be so much important in our lives that it will become impossible at one point of time to live without having access to the virtual world of screens. Graphic novels in post-liberalization years. Dawson situates this shift in India's socio-cultural atmosphere through what Sanat Banerjee, the famous post-liberalization graphic novelist, calls as bipolar disorder. By saying so, he means that the India had now become a unique mix of old and new, tradition and modernity, with an urge to experiment and innovate in future, but still feels nostalgic about yesteryears. He says, this very understanding has been indispensable in defining notions related to caste, class, religion, economic prosperity, and governance, which can also be seen through diverse graphic novels which deal with various such aspects. Dawson cites example from Sarnath Banerjee's The Harappa Files as a graphic novel that discusses post-liberal Indian scenario. So the Harappa Files, because Emma Dawson has discussed in her chapter, we are not doing Harappa Files in detail because it will be repetitive then, so we'll see. The River of Stories by Arijit Sen is considered to be the first proper graphic novel in India. River of Stories narrates a tale about environmental disaster and the fate of the Adivasis against the backdrop of politics and development projects, particularly the advent of the planned dam that will destroy the livelihood of the Adivasis. The usage of graphic narrative panels, backfill drawing and maps rendered River of Stories a unique position featuring the Adivasi form of storytelling. The Harappa Files by Sarnath Banerjee concerns itself primarily with the issues of New India, such as those of class, economic prosperity, and governance. The Harappa Files symbolizes itself as a generational and cultural museum of an India that is changing at pace. The act of remembering, memory, and recollection is a dominant stand throughout the text, particularly in comparing and contrasting the India of then with the India of now. Emma Dawson also argues that it is also the emergence of plethora of publication, regional and local publication houses that have also led to the emergence of graphic novel in India. Because, for example, Zuban Books is a publication house that is dedicated to the study or that is dedicated to publishing feminist works. So, if any kind of feminist graphic novelist and any kind of graphic novel that is feminist in tone, that has issues related to women's suppression or women empowerment or discrimination against women or violent histories against women, they will be very delighted to publish it and bring to the forefront such stories, such views about women which have not been told to other medias or other literary forms. Emma Dawson observes that this shift in production and distribution within the literary scene of India led to a type of domestic knowledge production and consumption. She adds that the expansion and opening of domestic markets has led to emergence of many domestic independent publishing houses like Zuban Books, Rupa Books, Jaiko Books, etc. Sales of e-books versions helped boost sales as well. All these factors contributed to establishment of publishing houses and collectives which published Indian graphic novels and Indian comics like Liquid Comics, Campfire Comics, Graphic India, Vimanika Comics, Level 10, The Pow Collective, etc. So the latter mentioned publishing houses are the publishing houses which only publish graphic novels. So it was the space created by erstwhile publishing houses like Zuban Books and Rupa Books that actually led to the development of, or that actually led to the origin of focused graphic publication houses where the books, so Campfire Books is a book that only publishes comics and graphic novels. They do not publish literary forms of text which are only in words, but visuals play, artists play very important role in such kind of publication houses. Now, Emma Dawson also says that, it is very important in post-millennial India that, while any text is being written in the post-millennial India, that most of the texts are class-based. I mean, it is only through the class, because she's talking here about Sarnath Banerjee's work, so class becomes a very important factor in delineating or highlighting what kind of graphic novel we are going to have, how class has affected, because post-liberalization India, as I said, has become aspirational. Everybody wanted to become rich, and it is this urge, it is this desire to earn more and more money leads to diverse kind of violence on the basis of caste, on the basis of religion, on the basis of ethnicity. It is this urge to earn fame, to become popular, to be more rich, that has led to all other sorts of violences. Sarnath Banerjee discusses Anna Hazare's 13-day fast for Jan Lokpal Bill in his novel. He says that as Mumbai's Dabbawalas joined Anna's fasting, middle class people working in office were most affected by this stand. Thus, he joins New India and its economic growth issues of food, consumption, marketing, and production are inextricably linked. Later, Banerjee recalls that gardener, driver cook, and entire canteen staff in the novel smelled of lifebuoy soap. It was the smell of working class. So see how commodities are being relegated to the people belonging to certain classes. So the working class uses lifebuoy soap, but the upper middle class men like my father used Liril and playing badminton on Sundays. So this is how he segregates through the commodity, through the usage of products, through the market driven products, that you can identify that which class uses what. And this is how you also segregate, this is how you also identify post-millennial generation as different from the pre-millennial generation as well. Graphic novels in India, in conclusion, Dawson says, graphic novels in India have tried to deal with emerging and transformational changes occurring in post-millennial India. For example, tensions, conflict, chaos, complexity, and some age-old questions like corruption, caste, discrimination, class privileges become central ground of discussion in post-liberalized graphic novels. Graphic novels like those of Harappa Files and Kashmir Pending sought to represent issues ranging from class struggles to violence and freedom. Graphic novels in India as an art form have concerned themselves with socio-political issues to a larger degree. Thank you.